Thank you for being here. First, let me tell you that we absolutely are not trying to undermine TRICARE in any way, shape, or form. We want to do everything we can to protect and strengthen the health care benefits that veterans already get. And my bigger concern is that there are those who want to privatize the VA. And we've got to do everything we can to fight that. The reality is that community care is very important. When community care began, it was around 10% of VA referrals went to community care. That number's up around 35–40%. It's gone up precipitously. And the reality is that we need to make sure we invest in our VA. We have a phenomenal VA in San Diego. We have a great clinic in Oceanside as well, the Red, White, and Blue Clinic. And I want to make sure we do all we can to protect and strengthen VA health care, which is, I think there were 3 or 4 of us that got right on it in Congress. And I'm very proud that thanks to Karen and her work, due to the work of the local group of veterans, we is San Diego High School and was junior ROTC. And so it's now that Jennifer Levin, VA. And if anybody wants to know more about the legislation, the bills, I think we have all that collateral and can provide it. And if we don't have it here, it's on our website. See, I didn't lose it all 3 minutes. No. It's very rare. Usually I go long.
Hi, Mike. I'm Paul Fussman. My wife and I live in Carlsbad. And first of all, thank you for addressing some of those big problems facing our country and the world. This is a somewhat smaller problem that affects the people down in South County, but I was wondering what's happening with that $300 million that has been promised to help with the Tijuana River project.
Yeah. This is Paul, right? Thank you very much. So, first of all, the reality is that the water quality at the border impacts all of us. There's been some research from UC San Diego, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, where they show how pollution or the ocean side even further this problem. And we got $300 million as part of that legislation for the Border Water Infrastructure Improvement, the VWIP program, and that's designated for San Diego region. Now, where the rubber meets the road is getting the EPA to determine what they want to do moving forward, and they determine a comprehensive strategy that costs around $630 million. $630 million. And that money also needs to go to a different organization, the IBWC. And so we have now legislation that will get that $300 million from the EPA to the IBWC, and the Senate hasn't moved on it. The Senate is sitting on that legislation. So we've been in, continuing the theme of being aggressive. We've been, calling Senator Padilla, Senator Feinstein, and others, saying, look, this is not partisan in any way, shape, or form. Let's get your friends across the aisle. Let's come together, and let's make sure for the good of our region, we get this done. So that's where things stand. And I've seen all the construction timelines, and they can never be fast enough for me. Particularly for our friends down in Imperial Beach and Coronado and other cities where they're, in IB, they're shut down, several months because of this. So we absolutely have a need to fix the problem, and we will, and I won't stop until we do.
105, you have a question? 105? Okay, 103?
Yes. No question.
No one.
Pass.
Okay.
President Dennis Randall,
Hi, Dennis.
at the border in Tijuana, and you've seen, unfortunately, the separation of families, which it's been happening consistently. And what happens to those kids when they're separated from their families and they're treated as unattended minors and they're shipped off to the Bronx or wherever? Just yesterday in the paper, I saw it. Is there anything you can be doing? Is anything being done?
Well, absolutely saw it in the UT, I guess, yesterday. Awful situation. And guarantee that when we get back to Washington, the San Diego delegation and others, I'm sure, will be working on this because it was unacceptable, the way that young woman was treated. And look, the last I saw, we had 2,300 Ukrainians at the border trying to get into America. Many of them had sponsors. In this particular instance, the woman had a sponsor. So, very bad situation. I think we've got to do all we can to welcome them. They've been through an awful lot. And I have said all along, first of all, immigration strengthens us. Parents were immigrants from Mexico. They came here when they were very young. My grandmother was 4 years old. My grandpa was about 12. Didn't have any money. Didn't have any formal education. Didn't know their youngest grandson. My grandparents. I would like to think that that can still happen in 2022. But we need to make sure that we don't forget what made us great in the first place. Was that we appreciated our differences. We didn't just tolerate each other. We didn't turn our back on one another, but we appreciated the differences. And we understood the importance of immigrants for our economy and for our community. And we can have, the last thing I'll say, we can have immigration policy that is both emphasizing security and humanity. We can treat people with dignity and respect.
104. $110.
Can I pass or what?
You got, here it is. Oh, you got one.
Move it up to the next one. I'll go next.
Congressman Levin, I'm a proud constituent of yours, and thank you for representing the 49th in an exemplary manner.
Your name and where you live.
Stuart Gaber in Tenebris.
Thank you. Thanks for coming up.
My question is related to the Veterans Hospital. I agree that it's pretty damn good. It saved my life twice. However, on the last Inspector General report that I read, it was 2019, it was rated 3 out of 5, which is an average rating. I'd like to bring that to your attention and see what we can do to raise it to a 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Can I ask give me the examples you said that saved your life twice?
Oh, it was one
To the extent you feel
yeah, one
comfortable.
excuse me?
I was just going to say, to the extent you feel comfortable talking about how.
Sure. One time I had an infection which resulted in sepsis. Yeah, that was not good. People died from that. And the second time it was discovered I had a gene defect, which was very important to discover.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, look, Dr. Smith, who runs the San Diego VA, I know they are working around the clock to do the best job they can do for the veteran community. I know that for a fact. I meet with them all the time. Our team speaks with them regularly. Is it perfect? No. No. It's a big bureaucracy. Like any big bureaucracy, things are slow to change and to improve. For me, I've had direct experience with this as the chair of my subcommittee for what's called economic opportunities, so housing, homelessness, the GI Bill, transition assistance, and the like. And just to give you one example, I wanted to know why it took so long for the people who had challenges with the GI Bill to get their phone calls answered. And what I found, I did a field trip to Muskogee, Oklahoma, because it turns out, this is true, it turns out that all of the GI Bill related phone calls from the entire country go to one call center that was a converted grocery store in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And when I got there, I watched these, I can only say they were like magicians being able to integrate all these different computer systems. They were using, for one of those databases, COBOL. You remember COBOL?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is like from the 60s, right? This makes like Microsoft DOS look, modern. And so somehow, some way they were getting this done. And we said, well, what do you need? How much money do you need? And they gave us a number. And guess what? We went out and we got the money. We got the money for it. And now they need to get the job done. But it doesn't happen as fast as any of us would like. Now, some people want to just undermine the whole thing. They just want to privatize everything. They would rather that our veterans have private insurance, right, as the default. I will never, never, never give up on VA health care. The last thing I'll say, I don't know if I'll be cut off here. We agree, Republicans and Democrats agree on a lot of things when it comes to our veterans. And that's why the 18 bills that I've mentioned, all bipartisan. If you come to my office, you'll see the law signed by the last president and the law signed by this president, truly bipartisan. One area where we still don't agree, unfortunately, is on doing right by our veterans who were exposed to toxic substances in post-9/11 conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we had a bill honoring our PACT Act that we put on the floor of the House that would actually create the presumptions necessary for post 9/11 veterans to get the care that they need due to the exposure from the toxics from the burn pits. And everybody talks a good game, but not everybody's willing to pay. And the unfortunate reality is this. You ask veterans, is this worth paying for? They say, we already made the decision to pay by sending the veterans to the exposed areas. And they're right about that. So when you see a representative, ask them, not only should we say the right thing for our veterans, but are you going to back it up and pay for it until the job is done? And I always will do that. I always do that.
106.
Got me fired up, Stuart.
102.
Got me fired up.
102.
Hi, I'm Adela Sanchez, and I'm here
Hi.
from Vista.
Great.
One of the things I have a problem with is SDG&E. And they, when we talk about price gouging, are the kings of it. They currently have a 3-tiered system based on the time of your use, and it drives me crazy. So I was wondering, my little tiny house that I have is a ridiculous amount of money. I was fortunate enough to have a job during the pandemic, but I don't know how people who are struggling right now can afford this. So I'm wondering what we're doing about SDG&E and some of their fees.
So I would love to see if there's anything we can do specifically to help you. And if you can speak with any of our folks in the back, and we can see if there's something egregious going on, or if the rate is not what it's supposed to be, something like that. Now, we know that rates went up about 30% in recent months from SDG&E. What if I told you that SDG&E was actually less egregious than some other utilities, as bad as things are here? So, pandemic and Putin and price gouging, I think the first two certainly apply, and maybe the third, although SDG&E isn't here to defend themselves, and we're going to do all we can to hold them to account for this, because you're right, it's absolutely out of control. Now, what's the biggest factor? The biggest factor is that we rely for a lot of our electricity at SDG&E and at other utilities across the country on fossil fuels. And specifically for SDG&E, natural gas power plants make up a huge percentage of the power that they generate that delivers that electricity to your door. And natural gas, as a fossil fuel, is subject to the same global commodity volatility as gasoline and as oil. So when Putin invades Ukraine, when the pandemic supply and demand issues emerge, although they're a little bit different for at-home electricity than they are for gasoline, obviously, but the Putin invasion of Ukraine, certainly, then you see all of a sudden natural gas prices go way up. 45% of European gas comes from Russia. Huge chunks. So natural gas prices go up, your electric bill goes up correspondingly. And if SDG&E were here to defend themselves, I think they would. And they would rightfully say that they are, as rapidly as they possibly can, transitioning away from fossil fuels towards renewables, towards storage, towards other forms of clean energy independence. We need to collectively push them to do more and to do it faster. So we'd love to help specifically with your situation, but in general, this relates back to the price volatility of fossil fuels. And if we want to end the volatility, we've got to end using so many gosh darn fossil fuels. Simple as that. So
108.
hello there.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm great. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can. What's your name?
Okay, my name is Mike Richardson. Hi,
Mike. Great name.
Yeah, it is. I'm an 81-year-old native of Oceanside. I was born here when there was about 3,000 people.
Wow.
So my question, Mike, is do you still support AOC's so-called Green New Deal, even though it really it has resulted in a decline in our production of our oil domestically, and it's really the main cause of the skyrocketing oil prices? And as a side question, you mentioned that you've asked for proof that the oil companies are not.
Orange price gouging.
Yeah, the last time I heard, we still are innocent until proven guilty here in this country. Do you have any proof that they are price gouging?
Plenty.
You don't have it, it doesn't exist.
Every time you drive to the
Look at
fund.
their income statements.
24 billion, okay, let me unpack this, Mike. First of all, thank you for the question. You look amazing for 81, by the way. Whatever you're doing, I want to know what it is and follow suit. So you go to there are 10Ks and 10Qs, and you just, the numbers speak for themselves. $24 billion for Exxon, dividends, buybacks, executive compensation, same with Chevron. This past year, the numbers are very clear, and I'd be happy to send you a volume of articles that has been written on this in the last 6 to 12 months about why those prices have gone up and why, despite their record profits, consumers are not seeing relief. Now, you understand that...
Can I
hold on.
send you
No.
about-
Let me finish. You understand that the Green New Deal that you mentioned is not law. It didn't pass.
No, but it's.
It didn't even get a vote.
It exists in all the regulations.
So you say that it's the cause when it never was even voted on in the Congress. Moreover,
That's
I don't think you read it because
I've read it.
I heard a lot about how it banned hamburgers and how it banned airplanes. I like hamburgers. I fly in airplanes all the time. Sometimes I eat hamburgers on airplanes. And it's not what you're saying. What we have to do right now is dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions across the board. Whether it's the cars we drive, whether it's the way we grow food, whether it's the buildings we build, whether it's the way we generate electricity to do all of the above, the way we move goods, we've got to dramatically reduce emissions. This is not theoretical that climate change is happening anymore. And I want to see...
It's a huge hoax.
It's a huge hoax. Well, we've got some of the best climate scientists on the planet right down the street. And I know what I said, though. You look fantastic. Great.
090.
I'm Marjorie's grandmother.
How are you?
I was not gonna get up and say anything.
I'm glad you did.
Hopefully. We'll find out.
However, you did touch a little bit about immigration. And I'm concerned about the Haitians that are stuck in Tijuana. And what are you planning to do about it? I know, Merrick Garland said that they were hiring more attorneys at the border to deal with some of these, problems. So how can we speed that? Because I noticed that they're pushed way back in the line.
Well, I'm very concerned about everybody down there right now. And I will say something that puts me at odds with the Biden administration. I am deeply concerned that between now and May 23, we are going to undo the pandemic-related restrictions. Not that I think it's wrong to undo those restrictions. However, we've got to have a plan. We've got to have a plan. And so I've asked the administration, what's the plan? Not just me, but Congress, the Senate, the House. And as we move forward, we know that the long-term strategy is comprehensive immigration reform. We know that we actually have to come together. I would like to think on a bipartisan basis we can get that done. We almost did once, a couple Congresses ago. They came very close. We have to realize that when I go out and I talk to small businesses in our community, the number one thing, what do you need, what do you need? They need workers. They need workers. And so we've got to fix the immigration system that is fundamentally broken. But in the near term, we talked about the Ukrainian community, we talked about the Haitian community. I'm worried about everybody that's stuck in a bad system. And when I hear that there are, the estimates are anywhere from 18 to 30,000 asylum seekers that are going to be needing processing, but the system can only handle maybe 20% of that, that gives me great concern. And so what I'm going to be doing in the coming weeks is continuing to advocate and press for a plan. We need a plan. Thank you. Hopefully if you come back in a month or two, they'll have the plan. But we're going to keep at it.
096.
Another pass. Another pass. Here?
109.
I don't know.
101. 109.
Hi, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Levin, you have made us so proud. I couldn't ask for more. Everything I asked you at the first and that you fulfill every one of those. Family or veterans, and you
Give me your name and what city?
Bonnie Lang,
Bonnie.
Vista.
Thank you, Bonnie.
My question, that I have you answered a good part, but I would like you to elaborate, if you will, about the oil companies and the corporate PAC money that many of these people sitting in their seats in the Senate and in Congress that are getting. And so their votes are based on who's funding them.
Yeah.
And I think we're all well aware of that. I don't think on either side that we're not aware of what's going on with that. And I would like to see accountability and maybe some notification for people, because the corporations, and they could be cable, the energy companies, I mean, there's a monopoly in many of these areas, and they need to be addressed, because I'm stuck with Spectrum, and whatever they do, I have no choice. I have to contend with the bait and switch with that. But in general, how do we hold them accountable?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Bonnie, for being here. Uh-oh, no buzzer. No, we don't need buzzer. Facts are stubborn things, Bonnie, and the facts are that there are about 40 of us in Congress that don't take corporate PAC money, which means there are 400 that do. And you'd be amazed. A lot of my colleagues, they say, why are you talking about this stuff? You just let things go the way they are. And then you look at these issues, right? You look at climate as an issue. Now, notwithstanding Mike, who seems like a nice guy, I don't know if Mike's stayed or left, but about 70-75%. Mike is still here. How you doing, Mike? About 70. We'll be friends before you know it. We won't agree on everything, but I promise you, I'm a good person trying to do things as I know the best that I can do. 70-75% of our district actually wants to see bold and aggressive steps to mitigate the climate crisis. And again, you have issues like gun violence prevention, where 80-85%, again, in our district, want to see common sense reform to have background checks for guns. You have a high percentage, I don't know what the exact percentage is, that want to see Medicare negotiate prescription drugs to bring down the price of prescription drugs. And yet you wonder, why is it that Congress cannot get things done that are so unbelievably popular? And I would offer to you it is because of the role of big money and the influence of corporate PACs and the tens of millions of dollars that they get, whether it's big oil, whether it's the big pharma companies. I'm not trying to pick on all the pharma companies. They do amazing things. Look at the mRNA vaccines. That's how we're all here right now. And they do an extraordinary job for our district and for our county here. But, it's interesting. When I talk to people in the industry, people in the pharmaceutical industry, for example, I ask them, if Medicare were to negotiate prescription drugs, would it put you out of business? They say no, we'd be just fine. We'd still make plenty of money. But they hire so many lobbyists. For every member of Congress, they probably have 3-4 lobbyists. And if they're giving contributions, 10x, again, 10 times as many are taking the money as not, that's where you need to start. That's where you need to have reform. The good news is I've co-sponsored legislation that would ban corporate PAC donations, period. The bad news is that I've got 400 colleagues in the House.
Start with Zuckerberg.
Fair enough. I got 400 colleagues in the House and probably 95 in the Senate that say, "What are you, nuts? What are you nuts? This is how we get elected and reelected." I'm just being honest. That's the reality of the situation, and it's probably the most important thing that we can try to do is to try to fix the campaign finance system. The For the People Act that we passed in the House twice had a public finance pilot. I'm not saying it's the end-all be-all that will fix everything, but we've got to be thinking strategically and creatively about what we can get done in the wake of the Citizens United decision as well. Thank you for the question.
094? 094? Oh,
Going once, going twice.
there's 3 attached, so let's try 099.
Hi, how are you?
So many rules around here. No doubt, you obviously, do a lot of work in that detail on your research and things like that. However,
What's your name?
Patty from Oceanside.
Thank you for being here, Patty.
Thank you. And I obviously have been in California longer than you. To know the difference between when I was raised and now. And number one, just a couple comments, Mike, and that is a lot of my friends could not attend today. It's a selective, weeding out of those that chose not to get a vaccine. But have you heard of such a thing as natural immunity?
Sure.
So I don't excuse me,
No,
I have the floor.
Be respectful, be respectful.
I have the floor. So all those in here that have gotten the vaccine could easily, just as easily get COVID again as my friends who have natural immunity. So I don't understand the reason. Number two, I don't have 30 seconds.
Yeah, you do.
Okay. Excuse me, I've been interrupted. I would like more time.
Go ahead.
Okay. Number two, I don't quite understand the idea about vets and private insurance, because I have private insurance, and I think it's kind of a good thing that they can get out of the system with private insurance. My husband is a doctor and served the military. Okay, so and the money that you've allotted for our area is great. That's great. For the beaches, for the rails, for the range and stuff like that. But the beach sand erosion doesn't make me stay up at night. Neither does the rails. What makes me stand up, Mike, seriously, is Title 42. I can't watch the news at night. It makes me nauseated to see illegals flooding across our border, and I don't see anything with this administration being done. And you're part of the administration,
No.
and you have children, and across the border are coming drugs. You look around and see the zombies out there. Your kids can get a hold of those drugs. You have traffickers, and your daughter can be trafficked. You have felons coming across the border. Your children can be murdered. You have terrorists coming across the border. So this is what keeps me up at night. I mean, the climate is hot or cold. That's not priority. What's priority? Open border, Mike. For your family and mine, what are you doing about it?
It includes your
First-
border.
No, come on now. First of all,
Excuse me?
no, Patty, it's you and me. We can talk later. And I asked everybody to, obviously the idea here is to keep everybody safe, keep everybody as healthy as possible, and I'm happy to have that discussion with our team. And I heard you loud and clear. With regard to Title 42, as I have said, I said before, I'll say again, I think more questions and doing more follow-up. I actually have been to the border a number of times. I've toured all of our ports of entry down there, and I thought somebody might ask about this, Patty, so I hope you don't mind if I talk about a few things that I have voted to fund. Is that okay?
I'll have to come some more questions.
Okay, well, I heard you out, hear me out, and we can talk line in the Congress. So, first, funding for, these are all things I've supported or voted on. When the previous or current administrations have requested funding for the border, I have voted for it. I've supported funding for new technology to scan for drugs and detect unauthorized crossing to stop the flow of fentanyl across our southern border. I'm proud to vote in favor of the annual NDAA, which has included provisions to allow the Treasury Department to impose sanctions on foreign drug traffickers and drug manufacturers. I've consistently voted to provide robust funding for Customs and Border Protection so that it can fulfill its mission. This year alone, I helped pass $14.8 billion in funding for CBP, $8.26 billion in funding for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, $72.4 million for new aircraft sensors, $256 million for border technology. Patty can stay if she wants. It's okay.
Now the rules.
So I directed CBP to leverage advanced capabilities to better detect, interdict, and deter the flow of illicit drugs at our ports of entry. Let's talk about fentanyl for a minute. I voted multiple times to place fentanyl in Schedule 1. So Patty, honestly, as a father, I am horrified by this. Yesterday, I saw a report that one pill, a young man was 13 years old, he took one pill and he died. One pill. It's unacceptable. It's unbelievable of what is happening. but I'm going to continue to vote in favor of stronger enforcement.
What about the wall?
And also treatment. I can't win them all, Mike. You can't win them all.
Yeah, but fentanyl's coming across from China.
Hold on. I've repeatedly supported funding for the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program, which assists law enforcement in areas including the southwest border and through San Diego and Orange counties. I voted for the Fentanyl Sanctions Act, which enhanced the president's ability to impose sanctions on synthetic opioid traffickers and manufacturers. I'm a co-sponsor of the Fentanyl Results Act, bipartisan bill that would allow the State Department to withhold foreign aid for any countries that allow the production of fentanyl, help foreign law enforcement agencies identify, track, and detect synthetic drugs, and develop and share expertise on reducing the demand for illicit drugs. And then not just the enforcement part, but the treatment part is really important as well. I've consistently supported funding for the Drug-Free Communities program, which provides grants to community coalitions that work to prevent and reduce substance use among our youth. The Substance Abuse and Prevention Treatment Block Grant, which provides states with funding to prevent and treat substance abuse. I'm a co-sponsor of something called the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery 3.0 Act, which would expand support for treatment and recovery services. My children, I care about the children out there, whether they're the children of Republicans or Democrats or independents. We have to get fentanyl off the street. We've got to do all we can.
My husband and I discuss this all the time. It seems like, I think it was in the 50s or something, there was a guest worker program. It's obvious to me. A Mexican worker came from he wants to go back.
She was looking for a new one.
Have a pass, have a passport, some sort.
Well, we have, so I think that we absolutely do need to reform this system, and I sponsored something called the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. Between that and the Dream and Promise Act, I hope it would do a lot to correct some of the challenges that we're seeing. Now, there's no question that farm workers are extraordinarily important. Every time you go to the store, where do you think that comes from, right? And so I'm proud to be supported by the United Farm Workers and to work with them to try to do all we can to protect the human rights and getting the workforce that we need and the working conditions that are needed as well to do the job and do it well. But what you're saying is absolutely correct in the context of comprehensive immigration reform. And if we can't, as a Congress, agree on all of the pieces needed for immigration reform, my hope would be that at least we could agree on a subset. That we could come together, Democrats and Republicans, and try to get something done. What I see, the biggest challenge that I see, is that there are too many people on both sides of the aisle who would rather have the issue of immigration to go talk about and campaign on, rather than actually doing something to solve the problem.
094.
We just did.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a 094? I'm good. You're going to talk. You're next.
Sorry.
111. 111.
All right, well,
How are you? What's your name?
my name is Jeff Bowl. I live in Encinitas.
Thanks for being here, Jeff.
So one of the things one of my questions that you can help me with, help me understand, is right now, what kind of image do you think we deal with politicians that never seem to realize that their day in the sun should come and they should move on? I'm talking about President Biden. I'm talking about Nancy Pelosi. I'm talking about people that should, at some point, question, please. We can talk about that later. This is a serious question. To me, when I compare President Biden, I'm old, but I'm not that old. But I remember as a small boy, John Kennedy was president. And he had, and I was a little boy, and we were on the line. Everything was happening there, and it was dangerous. But the Russians and the U.S. had the common sense, and Kennedy was a leader. And he was able to convince the Soviet Union that the risk of nuclear catastrophe is something we want to avoid. So anytime I hear about Russia being involved in a conflict over another country that arguably could have been a communist state or whatever that somehow is in the status of it today, I just think that we need to be very cautious, but at the same time, the 25th Amendment of the Constitution, which this lady, the 25th Amendment says, is our president qualified to be the commander-in-chief? Can he deliver the responsibilities of the office? So what is your opinion of that?
I believe that he is capable, and that age isn't, people obviously can talk about the age of past presidents, including Presidents Reagan, President Trump as well. I think that, I hope that when I'm in my late 70s, early 80s, I look like Mike and I'm doing okay, and I'm with it. I think that President Biden, the way because to your original question, what sort of image, I think it's one where we stand up for global democracy, for one. And why it's so important that the Ukrainians succeed in protecting their country, protecting their major population centers and the like. And when I think about the impact that's why it's so important that we support NATO. It was 1949 when Harry Truman was President of the United States, and NATO became this new international order to protect the free world after World War II. And one of the things that I can't explain, and that I'm still trying to figure out, is how the other day, when we were virtually celebrating the anniversary of NATO, I believe 1949 was when NATO was created, we had a resolution in the House, and you can see it. It's really 3-page resolution. We're going to protect NATO, we're going to strengthen it, we're going to make sure that we fight for global democracy around the world. And 63 Republicans voted against that. And more Republicans voted for that than against that. But my concern, whether it's from the right, the left, I don't care, democracy must prevail over autocracy. And if you're not a supporter of the president, I get that. But I can tell you in my heart of hearts, I believe that that's what he's fighting for. And to the extent that we all can be in that fight together. Not as Democrats, not as Republicans, as Americans. As Americans. A Jewish American, he fought the Nazis in World War II. What do you think he would be? I know what he'd be saying if he were here right now. He'd be telling us to protect our institutions, to protect the rule of law, and to go and fight and win against authoritarianism.
I think I deserve at this point of my life to respond to what you just said. Yes, I do. No, wait.
How about we talk after? Well, okay, because I want to make sure they get their questions.
One more to get an offer this. 101?
That was me.
098.
I'm Elijah Rankin for this.
What's your name? I'm sorry.
Elijah Rankin.
Elijah?
Yeah, Elijah.
Elijah, thank you.
Just
recently, great.
Yeah, just recently moved forward and with the Elevated group. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on teen vaping and the uses of marijuana?
Well, Elijah, first of all, thank you for being here, and I'm grateful that you're here. I want you to tell all your friends to come to our next town hall, preferably if they live in the district, but anyway. It's just great to have young people participate, and I hope everybody knows there's an election coming up in November. So I'm amazed that a lot of people do not know as we go out and we talk to people. With regard to vaping, that's another thing. We were talking with Mike and Patty. I don't want to see my kids vape anymore. I don't want to see anything else. For us, it was cigarettes, right? So I watched as that same person I mentioned before, my grandfather who fought in World War II, I watched as he died because he was a smoker from lung cancer. And I told myself, I'm never going to smoke. And I haven't, because I saw that by example. We know from all the evidence that's out there that when we think vaping, the marketing around vaping from Juul and all the rest was that it was less dangerous. We know that it is still capable of causing really great harm, lung damage and all the rest. And of course, we're doing all we can to try to stop this about how many young people are doing this. So I would ask, please do not do it. And just the same, if you are underage in California, do not smoke marijuana. Do not use marijuana products, right? And whatever anybody in here thinks about cannabis or any of that, underage people should not be using any of that. And so, that being said, we've got a legacy of putting people in jail for low-level offenses, and obviously we've got to look at that. We've got to look at that as it's impacted our criminal justice system, and particularly disproportionately impacted communities of color, and that is not okay either. But just because I might feel one way or another about what other adults may do in their lives, I hate all that stuff. I hate, it's not my favorite thing. Let's just say that. But thank you for being here. I appreciate it. When I take a point of personal privilege, I'm going to say one more thing about youth engagement. So I have legislation, bipartisan legislation, to try to get civic engagement taught in more places with more research. This is not true of you, Elijah, because I can tell this is not true of you. But the average high school student, this is a real study, the average high school student can name more brands of jeans than presidents. Can you think about that? That is scary. That is scary. So I believe very strongly in civic education, civic engagement, and so we're going to do all we can to help. Former Justice Sandra Day O'Connor started a great program that I hope will get bipartisan support in Congress. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's good to see you again.
I'm just going to remind everybody about the 1 minute to ask your question.
Can I say one other thing also? Please let everybody ask their question. I would ask everybody to be respectful. I would ask all the people asking questions to be respectful. Right? I think it's important collectively as a society that we turn the temperature down a few degrees. We get out of our social media, cable news bubbles, and we actually listen to one another. And
She's asking, but if she wants to cut me off, I'll leave that up to you. I'm not kidding. Okay, so for context, the source of say veteran, and the reason I leave it up to you is
what's
because
your name and county?
oh, I'm sorry, Brandon Evelyn.
Thank you,
And I live in Oceanside, and I have a service-connected disability for anxiety, so I'm a little nervous standing up here. Not that I am. I'm here. I'm here.
Don't
So-
be nervous.
Well, that's easy for you to say. So at any rate, I'm here. And I just thought I would digress for just a moment, if you don't mind. My parents were lifelong Democrats. My dad was a Teamster. And my mom danced with Hubert Humphrey after going and helping him his campaign headquarters. One of the delights of her life. So, at any rate, and my grandfather supported World War II efforts as a farmer. My wife's grandfather was on the Phoenix during Pearl Harbor. He did get sunk and became the USS Valderrama, and got sunk in Argentina. And her father was on a destroyer, lost his hearing in the painters. So with that said, I'll move on to the points that I have here and see if I can do it without copying my paper. In 2019, at your last event, I asked about the Dependency Indemnification Act, the 10-year DIC for veterans' widows, and I won't go into all of, what I'm talking about. Maybe,
We spoke about it a couple months
You
ago.
can explain it to them, but nothing's been done. I've heard from none of your staff, even though you expect to do that. I'm wondering if leaving widows, all you talk about, the things passed, all of the widows of veterans, if I kick off, my wife's okay because she survived on disability at least 10 years.
Yeah, I'd
That's
like,
not-
first of all, I'd like
so
to
I would go back
apologize
to-
because after we spoke a couple months ago, I did ask my team to get in touch with you, and I'm sorry that hasn't happened.
So we can move on. I got two other real short ones.
Okay, we'll Eric, if we can make sure that we get in touch with him, it's Saturday, but certainly on Monday. Okay? Thank you.
Two real short ones. The omnibus package, we talked about that last time as well, and the provisions will make it tougher for American workers struggling with inflation as they're forced to compete as our lower wage individuals, no high school education or high school, are forced to compete with them. I happen to be an expert in that, and we can talk about it if you like. So we'll be in this situation again unless, making it harder for employers. You know what I'm talking about. I'll pass on that. Here is another one that's really important. It's your survey that went out.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd just like to speak to that for just a moment. Fighting gas prices.
Which one? Because we sent out a lot.
One that went out on fighting gas prices.
Okay.
And it came with a survey.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you,
So,
and you responded?
no, I'll tell you what. I won't, but I'm an expert in surveys. I have a background in customer experience technology. I was on the board of directors of a company like that. Okay? So I know a little bit about this. And if I can read my own notes, my hand is shaky. You mentioned three factors that were causing supply problems, and the pandemic, Putin, and price gouging. America went from energy independence to reliance now on foreign your survey. And survey, I wrote this out specifically, so I'm going to be very, very clear. My opinion on surveys, they're self-serving. The content is, because context is everything. I've got 3 sentences. Forced choice responses yield expected results. It's the science, political science. Politicians know with a high degree of certainty, survey outcomes, and they know them in
I
advance.
didn't like how the questions were written, and we can talk about that.
Well, let me just finish the layout here.
Okay.
2 more sentences. So they know the outcomes in advance. The concept of moral dumbfounding, I'll share with you later on if you like, to look it up. And herd theory sheds light on phenomena like birds of a feather, whether they be large flocks in flight dancing across the sky in unison, or predictably obedient lemmings charging blindly head on to the cliff's edge and with an inevitable outcome to follow.
Can I address one thing that you said before?
You got it.
So the facts are that this past year, but for what it's worth, whether we think this is the right thing or the wrong thing, this is just what happened. The Biden administration actually had more domestic oil and gas production than 3 of the 4 years under Trump. Those are just the facts. So the whole idea that somehow the policies of the Biden administration have ended energy independence, I offer to you and anybody that I want energy independence as well. And the way that we actually get free from Saudi Arabia, from clean energy, of global oil and gas pricing, which is gasoline at the gas pump. It is because if you want predictable, what if I could tell you that you can have predictable cost of fuel, predictable cost of electricity? You would like that.
I'd like to know, right?
You would like that.
Tell me.
You can do it with renewable energy. You can do it with widespread adoption of solar, of offshore wind, of storage and of other clean energy.
Current renewable energy in this country is 3% of everything that we've got.
Current renewable energy right now in the state of California, we can look it up. Adam has my phone here, but the California Independent System Operator has an app you can look at right now, and it's more like 30-40% during peak times of the day. We need to get to a 100% clean energy future, and I'm not going to stop until we get there.
I got one for you. Can I interrupt a second because I just want to say this because I've been in the that industry.
I said we talked before.
I know.
There are 3 people who ask
This is
questions.
like 20
If you ask
minutes.
questions.
You're done.
Thank you.
Well, on the peak side of things, I know people in giga plants and things like that.
We need 12 gigawatts of storage to go along with the new renewables. Look, if we're
It
going
won't
to,
work.
if we're,
I'll tell you what,
it is working right
one
now.
last thing.
What I'd like to do-
What I would like to do is have a debate with you on this matter. We're on that stage. It's your time to choose it.
Go
It's your time to choose it.
And if I may, the
I think we
last
just
question is now here, but before we ask the last question, I would like to say on each of your seats there was a comment card. I do read each and every one of those, and I would be very grateful if you would fill those out because we like to make improvements anywhere we can, and you are the best sources of making those improvements. So if you could do that before you leave, that would be fantastic. And at that, I am now going to pass it back to Jason.
Hi, how are you?
My name is Donna Minsack. I'm the Girl Scout and mental health care provider. And the question or the issue of the Ukrainian children the board was brought up. And for the last 5 years, I've been lecturing to various groups around the county on the trauma that the babies in cages at the border experience. And what I'd like to say to all the veterans in this room, this is not unlike any person that you know that has suffered PTSD from the war. The trauma that we are suffering at the children at the border is exactly the same and will be carried with them for life if there is not some sort of assistance given to them, as well as the children that came from the Ukraine and the adults that came over from the Ukraine also. But there needs to be something that we can do mental health care wise to help these children not to have to live a life remembering trauma. As we know, the military has had a number of suicides and these children are on that same path. So please help the children. Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. When I see children down there, and I've been down in different facilities and seen things as a parent that break your heart. How anyone stands, it's just heartbreaking. So you're absolutely right, and points well taken, and we need to do everything we can to try to provide assistance. And I do want to say that despite the challenges, I'm encouraged by this county and by a lot of our local leaders here doing everything they know to do to try to treat young people and children with humanity and dignity and decency when they get here to see the day.
I just want to call attention to the fact that we had a historic moment in this country this week, and I just want to have a round of applause for Ketanji Brown Jackson.
I think she has some fans here in the crowd. I mean Barb, by the way. And Justice Jackson, or Judge Jackson. Look, here's the deal. There's good and there's bad about this situation. The good is that confirmation happened, that 5347, that Ketanji Brown Jackson will be the next Supreme Court Justice of the United States. That is a good thing. The bad thing is it's become so polarized. And if you watch some of the questions that were being asked, it was unbelievable.
Did you watch them prior to?
And the reality is that I worry about both parties politicizing Supreme Court nominations. We've got to be very careful about this. Up until a number of years ago, we were able to get 95, 96, 97 people, senators, voting. for these nominees. Now, I'm not a senator. I watch it just like you. Maybe a little closer, I watch it from across the Capitol. So as thrilled as I was to see the outcome, I was concerned again by the process. Now, let me tell you this. President Obama and others always used to quote Dr. King, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. This past week, it bent towards justice. So, let me say this. I'll be back next month. And the month after that. And the month after that. And the month after that. When I started running, I said that I would have a monthly town hall every month for as long as I have the honor to serve. We did that, and then the pandemic hit, and we did virtual town halls, around 70 of them. And now we're back in person, so long as the public health allows, which I'm going to be doing them, and we're going to be taking questions, because that's what you deserve from your representative. Nothing less than that. We've done about 250 house parties since I started running in 2017. I hope we can do as many more until my campaign team says, Uncle, no more. And so if you're interested in attending, or we really do rely on grassroots support to spread the message. So whether you are somebody who is inclined to vote for me or against me, that's okay, I'm not mad at you. If you're voting for us and you're supporting us, I hope you tell your friends, your neighbors, your family workers, your colleagues, everybody that you can, the importance of voting this time, this year, and the difference on the ballot, and what we're trying to do to serve the community. If you're not for me, I hope you tell your friends that I'm not as crazy as they might think. Thanks for having me.